So today's topic is about keys to building scalable PSA. So I do have quite a bit of information to cover, but I wanted to highlight a little bit about what we're doing in 2017 and sort of where we're going already as a company, so that you could take advantage of some of the events that we'll be doing. In the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering maintenance practices within the 2 PSA solutions that we do focus on, NetSuite OpenAir and FinancialForce PSA. But another thing is, for those of you who are interested in the OpenAir platform, we do the user groups. So we are continuing to do those in 2017. And we are starting in February with our first one in the Dallas, Texas area. So we will be coordinating and looking for a host and sending out information about that shortly. Last year, we started doing FinancialForce user groups, partnered with FinancialForce. They were very successful, so we are looking to see if there's still interest. So if any of you are FinancialForce interested, let us know, because we'd love to hear from you and where we can start setting these up. But let's get to the main topic, which is keys to building a scalable PSA. So PSA, if you're not familiar with the term, is Professional Services Automation. It's a software system that basically helps professional services organizations run and manage the services, engagements, and projects that they're delivering, and provides a way to monitor and do data analysis with the information that's captured. Okay? The goals of a PSA are always to be scalable with the company, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar today, is things to think about as you're working with a PSA or deploying a PSA or selecting a PSA, because the way things are today is not necessarily the way things will be tomorrow, and it's hard to predict what tomorrow looks like, but if you can think in terms of here's what could potentially happen, you will be able to keep that in mind and build a scalable PSA solution. Now, the components of a PSA typically involve things like time capture, expense capture. Obviously, you're doing project management. That's one of the benefits of a PSA. But also being able to do reporting and analytics with some kind of financial tracking, either it's revenue billing or some type of cost management for the resources that you have on board. Okay. Now, given all of that, yes, a PSA is quite often used in organizations because they want to be able to manage the organization. But what does it mean to grow the organization? And growing is really focused on revenue growth, right? In my thoughts, my terms, in order to grow a company, yes, you're going to grow offerings and products and stuff, but all that boils down to bottom line, you're growing the company by the revenue that it's earning as an organization. And there's really two drivers for revenue growth, right? The quick and easy one is, well, just charge more. That's a short-term gain, right? Eventually you'll price yourself out of the market, or you'll give yourself a price that really starts limiting the amount of services work that you do or the amount of engagements that you get as a company. So really the longer-term growth to gain more revenue is to do more engagements, maybe bigger engagements, maybe focus on different areas of the industries or different offerings to be able to do different types of engagements. But it's really a matter of doing more projects. Okay, and that's the longer-term gain, that's the longer-term vision, and that's where I believe that you have to think in terms of how can I make my PSA scalable. Okay, not can I charge more money, but can I do more things and manage more engagements by project manager, by industry, by customer to be able to grow the company. Okay, so more engagements typically turn into more people. If it takes 3 people to run a project and you get, suddenly get 5, 10, 15 of those, now it's just a multiple, because resources have a limited number of hours they can deliver in a week. You don't want to burn people out. You don't want to, you don't want to cause interruptions in their personal life. So you want a productive, happy employee. So in order to balance out the more work and more projects, you have to increase the staff, of course. And this is not a surprise. I'm sure everyone on the phone is like, yeah, Jody, get on with it. But the things that, to ensure scalability, you have to think in terms of, okay, so if I have more projects and more people, what would I have to do differently to be able to manage a multiple of what it is I'm managing today, right? The factors of how you're managing things today start with your SOW. So as you're scoping your SOW, how much detail are you scoping? What kind of controls are you putting in place with the scoping? Because that's what sort of defines the engagement. Once you get the engagement, now you're turning that into a project and you're having to manage the budget for that project. What are the techniques and the tools and the methodology that you're following to manage the budget? And when I mean this, it really translates into how detailed are you tracking the activities? Are you going down to, I need to track and see if somebody spent half an hour on this task because I've given the task a 15-minute budget? That's an extreme example, and I'm doing it to obviously make a point, but there are project plans that I've seen that are very, very detailed where they're managing tasks down to the 1 hour level, and that's a perfect budget management dream, but now you have to deal with people putting timesheet data in the system, and now you could be spending tons of hours just managing the administration to get the data accurate when people are putting it in the system. Now, if you only have 1 or 2 projects, that's something maybe that's of interest and you really want to get a good baseline of detailed metrics. But if you're doing something like 100 of those, it becomes very unmanageable very quickly from a scalability perspective. Then, of course, resource scheduling. So now you're scheduling resources, and one of the goals of the PSA is to help you understand, okay, great, I've got a project coming. Who do I have? What kind of staff do I have? Do I have to go after subcontractors? Do I need to push this engagement out? And that all factors into how are you scheduling people. Quite often, people, the scheduling of people, everyone's like, okay, so are you available Tuesday at 10? Like that's more of an appointment calendar. That's not necessarily scheduling. Scheduling is more of a, okay, so you're dedicated to this project for 25% of the time. That means I can put you on something else and you can juggle. So planning for people to be able to handle multiple things and understand what they're currently working on is a difficulty in the scalability because you are dealing with people and there's a healthy balance of how much you dictate they need to do versus how much they manage their own workload day after day in their prioritization. Okay, so that's another factor to think about is how am I going to keep on top of everyone's schedule with the PSA, or do I need to keep on top of it? And then finally, what kind of forecasting dependencies do you have? Scalability and forecasting may not natively look like they would go hand in hand, but I was thinking in terms of, okay, so if I have engagements and the engagements have a milestone sign-off and the customer has to give a sign-off within 5 days by default, then I can actually earn the revenue or take the revenue or do the billing activity. Forecasting in that may be difficult as you grow the company because now you have too many things waiting for customer sign-off or making sure that you have a way to very easily track there's some things at risk behind upside as far as forecasting, how to track that at a more detailed level without going overboard and having so much detail to track that you're spending all your time with administration and you're losing productivity. Okay. So I think these are the 4 areas that I always look at when I'm trying to plan for growth and how am I managing this type of information today and how can I manage 5 times that in the future, and how easily would that be for me to continue what I'm doing at a larger scale? Okay, that's what I mean by scalability. So if you think in those terms, like, okay, yes, I need to update this project plan, but you find out it takes 2 hours of your day to update the project plan. If you're a project manager and suddenly instead of 2 projects you're dealing with 20 projects, now you're actually spending 40 hours a week doing updates. So where's the benefit of the project management tool to begin with? So I think the objectives to keep in mind to be scalable, there's compromises you'll have to make, and the compromises typically deal with granularity and accuracy of data. Managing the business, you're looking for trends, you're looking for data accuracy, but you're not necessarily saying, I need to know if you're available at 10 o'clock on Tuesday in your schedule, right? You may not, your forecast is an estimate of what's going to happen. It does not have to be 100% accurate, but you should be within a percentage of what your actuals are, because then that you can trust your forecast and trust what's coming in the deal. The example I have in mind as far as how to deal with compromise is the whole resource scheduling methodology. And this is really PSA independent almost. It's how detailed do you need to be to track your resources. A lot of it has to do with your type of business. If your business is a day-by-day appointment business, of course you have to track it at a much lower level of detail than somebody who says, okay, this project's going to be 2 years. I need a team of people to be dedicated to this project for 2 years. That's a completely different scheduling model. But like in this example, you have to understand what's the acceptable level of granularity for accuracy. Doing day by day, if you have a team of 6 people, may be easy, but if you have a team of 150 people, it may be very difficult, or you have to hire a lot of admin overhead to maintain the data. When you're looking at a PSA or the PSA that you have, look for those bulk update options. Look for those features that allow you to do quick changes in the tool, not person by person, but in groups of items, groups of people, groups of projects. Make sure you set up a cadence on how often this data needs to be updated. Hourly updates are probably not necessary. Weekly updates, perhaps at least monthly updates, would be something that would ensure the data is kept clean and you have a compliance measure then that you can use. And really don't sweat the small stuff. There's that whole book out there, and I don't mean to have copyright infringement, but let people manage their own schedule. Delegate personal responsibilities to the individual and let them know, here's what I need you to work on. Let me know if you have a challenge or you need some help in prioritizing what needs to get done first. Okay. Trust your team, really. Now, with scalability and trying to understand how to keep that in mind as you're looking at your PSA, as you're deploying your PSA, or even if you're sort of revisiting your PSA, you have to plan for change, right? As your business changes or grows, change will happen. It has to happen. If it doesn't happen, you will get stagnant. So change is going to happen. So really, the way that you need to handle change to accommodate scalability is focus on how it impacts the end user. That's what I think is the easiest, is put it in terms of how does it benefit you? Okay, not so much I need you to do this because it helps me. How does it benefit you? Because then maybe it's something that you can do better for the individual, or you can catch trends where people are maybe getting overscheduled on a regular basis. Right? Communicate often and early about what is coming, why it's coming, and then as it's being deployed, make sure people are aware of that. Why it's deployed, and then of course continue to follow up to get feedback from folks. Change is hard for everyone, so try to make it as easy as possible for people to understand what changed, when it changed, and what does that change mean to them. So make training information materials easily available, and quick reference guides are very useful, because then people will just spend a few minutes kind of going through them and getting themselves oriented. And since we're working in a PSA, make sure that you leverage the PSA to help with any kind of communication, because obviously if the change is happening inside the PSA or with a process that involves the PSA or a process in the organization, people who are putting their timesheets in on a regular basis will be inside the PSA, so any kind of communication tools like a chatter on Salesforce or a message board will definitely be able to help you communicate things clearly and more often. Now, with mergers and acquisitions, I think this one gives us an interesting scalability challenge, right? Because now it's not so much that the organization is changing over time, it is suddenly changing because there's been an acquisition or a merger of two companies. And I think mergers and acquisitions are a good thing because it gives you oops, went right over my slide. It gives you a challenge, because now you have how do I get this person inside my PSA without into the existing framework? How do I bring that person in this company into an existing framework. So that's the big challenge. But I think of it as an opportunity. I always look at it as, here's an opportunity to learn from another organization that was successful, thus the merger or the acquisition, and how can you take the best practices from both and incorporate that into your PSA. Then that opportunity will drive change, and that change then can consider the scalability of the organization. And I've got to shut my Dropbox down because it is driving me crazy. Okay. So a common approach on how people handle mergers and acquisitions is really educating the newcomers on, hey, by the way, this is how we do things, so you're going to just follow what we do. And when you impose change without feedback or opportunity to understand what the gap is that the people are changing from, you may get some resistance. You may have data accuracy issues. You may have attrition, which is going to be a big impact to the organization. So it's more of a disagree type feel, or you're being forced to follow a certain situation. What I would like to suggest is that you think more of like a joint task force. An acquisition or a merger gives you the opportunity to reevaluate how is the business itself, how are both businesses run, and where are the synergies of the businesses, where are the differences of the businesses. How do we track things differently? Maybe if they're similar businesses, what key metrics can be followed by both organizations? What are the equations that we're using? It's something even simple as utilization. How are you measuring utilization? Our target's 75, your target's 90, and you find out the underlying equation is slightly different, and in fact the numbers are exactly the same because of the way the denominator is being used. So I would suggest getting a task force together and going through things like the key metrics, understanding each other's current practices and policies to see where the synergies lie, and what kind of projects that you use and the methodologies you follow, because you can actually learn from each other and then take that into consideration to basically do like a deployment almost inside, not just put the new company on the platform, but consider the synergies and have both companies go through a change management, so that also gives the ability to combine the companies into one team focus. And the last area to consider for scalability is customizations. So this is where customizations are something you want to make the system your own. Okay, everyone does. That's why you have a deployment process. That's why you gather requirements. That's why you have to understand what your business model is so that you can configure the PSA to support that. And of course, keeping in mind, as I grow as a company, how do I ensure that what I've configured requirement-wise will be able to be scalable going forward. But customizations are something that can actually hamper the scalability if they're not handled in the appropriate manner. The customizations are typically things like built custom functionality. If you're on a platform like Salesforce that gives you the ability to write Apex code, you can write your own functions in the platform. Or if you're on the OpenAir product, you can do JavaScripting to add feature functionality into the system. So you can write your own feature functionality inside the tool. You can also customize the way notifications happen. Who's getting notified? When are they getting notified? What's the trigger for the notification? And the workflows as far as where timesheets go, maybe sign off on project setup or budget. All of that is a type of customization because you're dealing with very specifics on where it's going to go and who gets it at the end of the day. And then introducing some type of automation into the tool to reduce administration. Examples are, as you're setting up a project, if you enter a budget and check a box, it will automatically create a financial record that's similar to a customer PO that you don't have to normally do, that you would normally do manually, but you can actually have the system do it for you automatically. Okay, so these three areas are areas that I see people customizing the PSA solution beyond what the PSA vendor provides. Okay, and this is actually very good to do this. You want to think in terms of making it your own and building the functionality out for your business model. But the things that I encourage customers to think about, and whenever these type of topics come up, we definitely want to vet them with the customer, is make sure to do your homework and your research before you start building a lot of very specific customizations to your current business and your current staff. Having a notification that goes to Susie whenever a contract comes in, well, what if Susie leaves? What if Susie now becomes a team of people that deal with contracts? Is the notification that you're putting in place something that can scale and include people beyond Susie, or is it just Susie always and forever? Right? So the homework and research that I would suggest customers think about is learn about common practices in the industry. There are many organizations out there, PS Village Forums, TSIA, the SPI research findings. Those things are out there looking at trends in the industry, and those trends drive vendors to make changes in their system, but you may be ahead of the trend, or maybe you're finding a new trend in there and looking to see where the trends are going, because if you write something very specific to your current situation and then you start following what the industry is doing, all of that customization may have to be changed. And that it could be just a practice or a policy on what you're doing inside the organization. I think a really good source of information is talking to PSA consulting vendors that have experience with quite a number of customers. Of course, I have to put a plug in here for TopStep, but PSA consulting vendors like us, we are here to help you weigh the pros and cons of doing that customization. And it's not about can we, it's should you, okay? It really should be about the should you conversation. Where are the benefits going to be received within the organization? Is there a cost benefit? Is there an efficiency benefit? Is there a timing benefit? And what happens if things change in the future? What if you merge with another company? What if the department structure changes? What if the ownership changes? What if the projects that are coming in from sales suddenly turn into multi-component objects? Those kind of things are things that PSA consulting vendors that have lots of experience can highlight things that have happened with customers in the past, or we've learned lessons quite often ourselves, so benefit from that by just talking to us and going through those pros and cons. Because at the end of the day, you may still continue forward with the customization, but you may design it out slightly different to be scalable. That would be my goal for all customers that want to deal with customization, is that it is a scalable solution, and it will not require someone to be on staff to always monitor, change, update a piece of code that may have been developed. Okay. And always think in terms of what happens if, what happens if the person who is supposed to, fill this data into this text field does it wrong. Then what happens is if in an automated solution and the wrong data is put in, and suddenly all this other stuff is created automatically, and now all of that data is bad. So think in terms of how can you help the automation be something that has a control in it, but also a recovery. What if you need to undo what it is you do in the system? What if it breaks? What is the impact to the organization if what's been put in place no longer works anymore? How can you, is there a workaround that you have to consider? So it's the what if scenarios that you want to think about, okay? And then, of course, if someone makes a mistake, how hard is it to fix the data? This is really, my point here is really more for the automation piece of it. If you add code that basically creates a bunch of stuff automatically and then you find out all of that's wrong, how hard is it to sort of unwind that? How hard is it to delete that data in the system? So these are the things that, when you're like, well, I really wish I would have a script that does this with a timesheet and it fixes this on the project and it automatically sends out a report that does this. That those kind of automations, I love thinking about those and talking about those with customers because it's typically talked into how it will save them so much time. But then I always add okay, so what if this changes? What if that changes? What if this is done incorrectly? How can we design it out, and is it still worthwhile to pursue if it's something that actually may require a lot of maintenance going forward? So those of you on the phone who are familiar with development life cycles, I won't bore you with the details, but basically if you are doing customizations, I do strongly encourage you to follow essentially a development life cycle. Pretend like you're actually writing code from scratch, even though it may be within a PSA environment, because you do want to still define all of your requirements quite clearly. Don't shoot from the hip and say, I think I should just do something like this, because if you don't consider all of the influencing factors, you may build something that ends up having a lot of rework, and you'll be disappointed, and we never want a customer to be disappointed with a customization. Definitely do testing of how it should work, but then try to break it. I always love to try to break stuff when it's given to me for testing, because I want to check and see if things are supposed to be highlighted after, above the number 40, I'm going to test to see what it does with number 40, right? That's the boundary conditions. Or what if I put invalid data in here? Or what if I actually try to process 100 of these versus 2 at a time? What happens? Because that will drive a lot of things out of the design, out of the coding that needs to be adjusted. And make sure you communicate that change to the organization. So with that, PSA tools, they are meant to be scalable, but you can actually drive down a path where scalability becomes something that you have to watch, or you have to make sure you're considering it in the configuration. Don't let your PSA tool get old. Make sure you're continually looking at it to see if it is able to be scaled and people are using the tool correctly. Leverage acquisitions and mergers as opportunities to enhance and deploy a team environment with the two companies joining together. And of course, keep scalability in mind when you're doing customization, so you don't box yourself into something that you will have difficulty maintaining going forward as the organization changes. And so keeping all that in mind, your PSA actually can be quite scalable, and you too can have a super PSA.